So you want to understand how the game Bridges works. Maybe you've seen the tutorial and you browsed over the rules, but it's still not clicking as to how the game actually works. I'm here to break it down for you. Bridges is a strategy game that's played across multiple real-life days. You get 10 moves every day that you can spend however you wish. With these moves, you can do a couple of things. First thing you can do is that you can build a bridge, like this. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not going to get into all the different valid bridge types. You can check your cheat sheet to figure out which ones work and which ones don't. But when you build a bridge to a tower next to you, you can then claim a floor on that tower. You can only build bridges that connect to your network, so you can't just arbitrarily start wherever you want. You have to start here by your starting tower. So, the simplest way, the simplest strategy in bridges is to build one bridge and grab one floor. You can keep doing this as long as you have connections to build, which in the case of this tower is pretty awful, but you can go this direction if you wanted. We could build another bridge, claim another floor. Oh cool, look at this. We got it to a ladder. This is the second level of strategy. In towers, you'll find ladders like this. Ladders enable you to go up a floor to get access to a whole new layer of the bridges map. But aside from that, they also give you access to a floor that you don't have to build a bridge to. This means I can now grab this, and I only had to build one bridge, and I got 2 points. And so, if you think of the initial strategy as one bridge, 1 point, over 180 moves, you're going to end up on 90 points. You can think of that as like a very baseline level of point value that you can get in the game. As long as you're not doing anything too dumb, that's pretty much guaranteed. But now we found a ladder. And so we actually get one bridge to 2 points, and that's a 66% return instead of a 50% return. So in some sense, you can think of trying to maximize your point value as trying to get the highest percentage, a ratio, between the amount of moves you spend claiming floors to building bridges. You want to minimize the bridges, maximize the amount you're spending on claiming floors. So every time you find a ladder and you claim the 2 floors, this will on average, not average, this will increase your final point score by 0.5 above that 90 baseline. So grabbing 2, if you find 2 ladders, get them both, then your final point score will be 91 instead of 90. That's pretty good. Now, to come back to the next thing that we can do, aside from just building bridges and claiming floors, the other way to get points is to fully claim towers. So in this case, if we build back to the one we were just at, we can come in here and claim the top floor. Once we've claimed the bottom floor and the top floor, there's only a 2 tall ladder, we can then come to the top and claim the whole tower as a whole. That tower, in your own area, claiming the tower only provides 1 point. So it's still 1 move, 1 point, but we didn't have to build a bridge. So in some sense, you can think of claiming a tower in your own area as the same, kind of worth the same value as finding a ladder, right? Because we got 1 bridge, and we just got 2 points, but we had to spend a move to get each of those points. So still a 66% return, still pretty decent. So basically, you can kind of think of this 66% return ratio as a really good baseline to understand what is a good move. Now, I'm kind of been throwing around 2 different ways of considering points. I talked about the 66%, and I also talked about the effect it has on your final score. Those are kind of 2 ways to think about it, and I'm not sure which one would be most intuitive to people. But they both basically mean the same thing. So as I said, a 66% value on 3 moves is worth half a point at the end of the game. A 66% value on 6 moves would be worth 1 point. I think maybe that second one's a little more intuitive, where we say every ladder is worth half a point to your final score. Claiming a tower in your own area is worth half a point to your final score. Now, let's go and look at places outside of your own area. If you claim a full tower in this gray zone or another player's area zone, let's say we somehow connected up our network to here, and we built 1 bridge in, claimed this floor, and we built 1 bridge in to claim this floor. Pretend that this works. I'm just showing you a hypothetical. So pretend this was open. We'll just break it open actually. We claim this, and we claim the tower. This claim point is actually worth 2 points in this area, not 1. So let's think about how that affects the final score. Originally, when it was just 1 point, it was worth half a point to our final score. And now we don't actually have to expend any moves to get that second point. So actually, that's just a free bonus point. That's +1 to the final score without having to consider what we lost to get it. And so actually, claiming this whole tower will give us a 1.5 increase to our final score. And now you can kind of think of it as this bridge, this floor, this bridge, this floor. Those are net even. Those are just our 50%ers. Those are just our basic things. But this cap point, when we placed it, we got plus 1.5 to the final score. And that's really good. So the next kind of tower we can claim is the white towers in the middle. These ones are worth 3 points when you finish claiming them. And so it's a bonus 2 points. So claiming this is a plus 2.5. Still that half point from the first one, and then 2 points that are just completely bonus, completely added to your final score. And this is kind of why white towers are so good, because the extra freebie points kind of play in huge. And I think what you're going to find as you start playing Bridges is that Bridges is a game of inches. I've been talking about the amount that you improve from these plays of finding these important value, high value things, and the increase is like half a point, 1 point, 2 points. So every single point that you can eke out to your final score is critical and makes a big difference. So don't sleep on the fact that, oh, that one's 1.5, this one's 2.5. It's not that big a difference. It's a big difference. So every single amount you can get will really change that. And the other cool thing about these tall towers is they can also have ladders in them. So let's say we come over to this tower here. You see it has one ladder there, one ladder there, and one ladder there. And you can claim the whole thing. And it's white. So that makes claiming this tower really, really effective. So let's use our calculus here to try and figure out what this value is. So it's half a point for this ladder, half a point for that ladder, half a point for that ladder, and then 2.5 for the cap. And so if you add all of that together, you're going to get 5 plus 5 points, which is insane. Sorry, my math is wrong. Plus 4 points. Still insane, less insane. But that's plus 4 points to your final score for claiming this tower, and it uses up a significant amount of moves. So basically, you would think, well, I'm using a lot of moves to get this tower, right? And this also is under the assumption that you don't have to waste any moves, which in a sense you kind of don't. I'll get into that a little bit later. But basically this is on the assumption, okay, we already have a connection to the tower next to it, and let's say we just wanted to build over these things, right? Because there's a bunch of ladders, you actually only need 3 bridges to connect to it, and then you can spend the rest of the points just capturing to your heart's content. So because you can make claims previously, and you could also claim this tower, we assume that any connections you made to get here were already giving you point value. You haven't wasted any of the things you've used to get here. So we just consider this final capture of this tower on its own is really huge, and it's going to make a big swing to your final score. Whereas if you were to do the same, let's say that there was a 2 tall tower that was somehow worth the same kind of percentage, right? Let's say that, this 2 tall tower had a ladder in it. They're not allowed to have ladders, but let's say it did. You could make 1 bridge and you could claim 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd get 4 points from 1 bridge. So if we calculate that, 4 to 5, I think that would have a 1.5. increase. Sounds about right. But yeah, it'll be two. Sorry, 2 point increase. 2 point increase to your final score. Sorry, doing math live is not a great idea. But anyways, so this actually the final score is not increased by that much, and you don't have access to very many of these good plays, right? So like a good play like this, where there's a ladder in like a easy to get to tower, or maybe two ladders in a 4 high. You know, these are really high value towers. There's not really a ton of those on the map, and so you might only get one or two of them. And so even if the percentage is just as good, the ratio, between moves and points is just as good, the actual final value is less because you can only get a couple of points out of the tower. So these ones in the middle are kind of inherently worth more because you can just make one play, get the whole tower, and you've actually gotten a larger value to your final score. And so that's why I think thinking of it as the value to your final score is helpful, because it shows you kind of this. Because if you just look at the percentages, you might be thinking, oh, some of these smaller plays are really, really amazing. But the issue is the smaller plays, there's only so many of them, and they don't take up all your points. So you'll have a bunch of extra moves at the end, like, well, what do I do with these? I have no good moves. But if you use all your good moves here in the middle, you only have to capture a couple of towers and you're set for the game. You've already used up all your quota and you're happy. So basically, making these plays in the center not only is good because of the extra points that you get from claiming the whole tower, but also good because you only have to make one or two big pushes, and then you're pretty happy and set for the game. Whereas working on the edges, you have to make a whole lot of smaller moves and lots of smaller optimizations all the time, constantly. And you can't let up. You can't just like take a mediocre tower in between to make it work. And so that makes playing on the edges much harder. Playing on the edges is still very viable. As I said, you still can get pretty high percentages on some of those high ladder towers out here on the edges in the gray zone and your neighbor's zone. But it's just a lot harder versus coming to the middle, claiming a couple of really high point value towers, and walking home happy, right? So this is kind of the basic way I think of thinking, both as a percentage of what's the percentage of points to total moves you've used, and if you want to maximize that percentage, but you also want to think about how is this going to affect your final point value, and you can do that really simply by just adding half a point for every ladder, half a point for the cap, and then +1 and +2 if you're in the gray zone for the white zone, respectively. Okay? So, let's talk about what that means for relative values of areas. This means that your own area is relatively less important. Because there might be ladders in your own area, and it can be good to get them. It can also be good to be defensive and fully claim some of the towers along your path, but the actual overall point value of them is not really that high. They're both short, and you also get the lesser points. Playing in the gray zone and your neighbor's zone is quite good. You can get pretty decent value, especially if you find some of these towers with a lot of ladders in them. And so playing in here can be quite effective. Basically, you're thinking 4 high towers with 2 ladders are going to be insane, regardless of where they are, right? Or 3 highs with a single ladder. These are going to be good. Whereas a 4 high with 1 ladder is slightly worse than a 3 high with 1 ladder, just because of the relative amount of bridges you end up having to make to fully claim it. So basically, you want the highest amount of ladders to the shortest amount of tower. Or you want to get into a better zone. So, if you compare like these 2 towers, this one in your own zone, this one next to it, you'd rather, and let's say they have the same number of ladders. I don't know if they do or not. Let's say they both have 1 ladder. I think they both have none, but imagine they both had 1. You'd get this one first before you'd get that one. And so basically, this incentivizes you to quickly move out from your own area, get some stuff here in the gray zone, and then if you're not going to end up conflicting with people, get a bunch of white towers and finish out with a whole ton of points. Now, let's talk about this round of bridges specifically. Okay, so you're saying like, you're trying to think of a strategy for yourself. Where are the important ladders? And I can actually show this to you because I have this board over next to us, and we can take a look where I've removed everything and replaced the ladders with diamond blocks. And so actually you can see now really easily where all the ladders are. I would highly recommend doing something like this if you feel comfortable using World Edit. But or you can just run around and kind of figure this out a little more manually. It just takes a little more time. But basically, where are the good towers in our round of bridges? Well, there's two really notable ones that should be talked about here in the center. I showed off one of them, and we were looking earlier. It's a 6-high tower with 3 ladders. Now, ladders, I didn't mention this, can't be adjacent to each other, so there couldn't be, 5 ladders in a 6 tall tower. It's not possible. 3 is the most it could have. It's for similar as like a 4 tall ladder. 4 tall tower can have 2 ladders. So there are this tower and this tower that both have 3 ladders. So it's going to be a really exciting game. There's some really big point value here in the center, and around them, there's still ladders in these towers next to them. So these like white towers, even a single ladder, are still quite good in point value. As I said, because that cap point gives you so much value, and then these like single ladders both make mobility easier, but also make the point value really good. So I foresee some people kind of making a push towards the center here to try and claim these 2 towers. Don't sleep on them. I think in my first round, I very much underestimated how much those free bonus points that come from the higher cap points are worth. They or make a big difference. And I guess just another way to think of that comparison of why I say that's so important is like 2 bonus points. What do you have to do to get that +2? You would have to go find 4 ladders that somehow are all next to each other that you can chain together without any wastage in between. And that's the thing, right? There usually is some wastage to get to where you want to go. To find, if I wanted to get this ladder and this ladder and this ladder, I can't do that with one bridge between all of them. Well, in this case, you might have some luck, but in most cases, it's really awkward. Whereas here, the point values are all right next to each other. So you've got this tower right next to each other. That's a +1, +1, half, 1, 1.5, 2, and then +2.5 for both towers. And so that's 7. +7, all here in one place with no wastage. Only wastage would be what you use to get here. And if you can grab ladders along the way, you're actually going to ladders and towers along the way, then you're actually in really good shape for points. So these 2 are great. You also see that next to the 2 there are a bunch of towers with 1 ladder in them. So lots of good stuff to claim around here. Now if we look on the other side, you might say, well, okay, cyan and magenta are kind of screwed, right? Well, not quite. So if we look over here, you'll see that there's a lot of these. There's a really high cluster of ladders in this gray zone area. So you'll see there's 2 ladders in that tower. If we move over here, there's 2 ladders in that tower. There's 2 ladders in both of these right next to each other. There's 2 ladders in this. There's 2 ladders in this white, as well as a couple of white towers with a single ladder in them. One of which here is to the top floor, so that lets you actually claim these 6 floors over on the side. So actually, as I said, there's like one big play. You can go in and make that one big play, but if you string together a whole bunch of these smaller plays along the way, here's magenta, and you don't have to fight for them, then actually that can get you a really high point value as well. So I think that there's going to be some interesting strategies from cyan and magenta to see how much of this value over here they can claim and how much they can string together. And who knows, if the other teams are a little bit slow, you might be able to make a mad dash into the center and grab these anyways. I don't really see that working out too well. It's quite far, but definitely at least this cluster of white towers here with the 2 ladders and then the sets of ladders nearby is definitely very much worth your while and will be very helpful. Cleaning these 2, this is a cool tower configuration where it's 1st floor ladder, 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 4th floor ladder. And so actually you can like basically just do like the one connection, one connection, one connection, one connection, one connection back and forth, and just claim both towers outright. It's really cool, and you end up kind of even getting better value than like I initially talked about for these two towers, because you can kind of use the bridge to get two ladders at once. One bridge gets you like two ladders in some senses. So it's like a little more efficient. Not by a ton. It's not quite that good, but like one on the end will be counted twice. So it's pretty cool. Otherwise, I'm not going to look too closely at kind of the individual paths. You're going to have to look yourself to figure out how you actually get to the higher floors here. You know, you're going to have to make sure you find at least one, at least a second floor ladder, at least a third floor ladder, and a fourth floor ladder, so you can start fully claiming some of these towers, right? That's I leave it to each team. I just kind of wanted to point out some of the most pertinent features of this map, of where kind of the highest clusters of ladder value are, and what teams should be fighting over as they try to actually win this game. Which kind of brings us to the last part of strategy I wanted to talk about, which is attacking and defending. Is it worth fighting over towers to get them? I mean, if you say, hey, you know, this one white tower here, if I get it, is huge point value, and it gives me access to the 6th floor, so I can start claiming the stuff around it more easily, like, you know, should I fight over that? And this is where it comes back to, I was talking about how bridges is a game of inches. Every move you waste painting someone else's bridge, or repainting if someone attacked you, or heaven forbid you've claimed a section and gotten some points and they cut you off entirely. Every time you lose that, it's a very huge setback. Even just losing a couple points might be the difference between getting first and third. So ideally, you want to spend as little time actually fighting with people. Usually what happens a lot is that the PvP is more posturing. You're going to try and use your use your moves to push ahead and fully claim a tower right next to somebody, so you kind of cut them off, but still are getting yourself lots of point value. So let's say, for example, you're the red team and you want to make sure that you get this tower over here instead of orange. You might like make a really sharp line where you kind of try and cut them off. And before claiming that really tall one, which is a lot of points up there, you might claim one of these shorter ones near the edge, and do it in such a way that you make it really hard for orange to get past you. So like maybe like you claim this tower, and then you claim this tower over here, and you have bridges stretching across like this between them. So these are two, you know, good point value. You're not wasting point value. You're not like taking a tower you didn't want to take. But by doing that now, you've cut orange off from getting into the tower you want. I mean, now this might be like not as good as just claiming the full tower if you can, you know, if you have the points to do it. But, you know, claiming a full 6th high tower can be quite slow to do. And so maybe you might want to start off by just edging them out and making it really tough for them to get to the stuff that you do want to get to. Or, for example, let's say maybe you're a magenta over here, and you want this big cluster of whites in the middle, so you're going to come and you're going to actually claim this gray tower here first. Like this gray tower and this gray tower, which are kind of on the edges, and that way you've now gained territory for yourself that's you can more slowly like digest as time goes on. But you have to be careful when you're doing this, which brings us to thinking about how to be defensive when you're making plays to make sure that people can't take advantage of you. Now, it's really hard to really make sure that nobody can ever do anything to hurt you, right? There's usually creative ways that enemy teams could get around key points and attack your backline, or find a tower you haven't fully claimed and paint some of it and claim that tower to cut you off. Or maybe you're working on two fronts and you're having to deal with two teams at one time, you can't fully digest everything, and they take some of the stuff you really wanted to get. So how do you play to make sure that you can't be taken advantage of? One way to do this, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is to make bridges that cut off sections of the map. So these really long diagonals are great for this, Where if you did something like this, instead of that shorter bridge, you actually now prevent the blue team from making any headway into your area. They can't make bridges that cross this. And so by doing this intelligently, you can basically make connections really hard for the enemy team to get inwards towards your maybe less protected areas. So basically you want to think of what your front line is and try and make sure that front line either is mostly contained of towers that you fully claimed, or has good bridges that take up nodes and take up paths that an enemy would want to use to come in and attack you. Now, as far as when to claim a tower and when to just move on and leave it to claim later, you need to think about how close that tower is to enemy. So maybe an early tower you might not claim early. You might leave it only partially claimed, or maybe just build the bridges, because the enemy is just realistically not going to get back there anytime soon. But once they do start claiming towers closer and closer to you, then you need to start thinking, hey, is it time to claim this? As far as claiming, sometimes you just want to pass through a tower and you don't actually want to claim it. Let's say you have to go through this tower with no ladders for some reason. Claiming the tower sort of makes up for it, but maybe you'd rather be spending those points in much better places. So can we get away with not fully claiming this tower? Because once you fully claim a tower, enemies can't paint bridges that go to or from it. Well, actually, you can take advantage of this rule and claim every other tower. So let's say you fully claim this tower right here. I know I'm using orange and this is supposed to be magenta, but I don't care. Let's say you fully claim that tower there, and you fully claim this tower here, and you use the tower in between as a stepping point between those two nodes. Well, actually, now you don't care if blue comes in and does something to this tower. Let's say they come in and they even want to take this floor. That's fine. They can't paint either of these bridges because both of these two towers are claimed on either side of it. And so actually, what you can even do is not claim this floor. Leave it till right at the very end when it's clear, okay, nobody's going to contest us, and the last day maybe you get the extra point. Because if you take it early, and blue comes in and paints it, well, you lost out on a point. That's minus 1 point. Whereas if you didn't take it, it's just slightly less efficient. You had to make 2 bridges to get to over here, this high point value, but it's not minus points. And so basically, yeah, these kind of maybe possibly contested towers you can leave open, not claimed, until the very end. And basically, it just never... The truth is, it's never going to be worth blue's while to come in and take this tower because it doesn't actually cut you off. It doesn't actually prevent you from getting all the points that you have, and so they're just probably not going to mess with it. So basically, if you do this strung all the way back where you claim every other tower along your path, you can actually... This can allow you to not have to spend extra points to fully claim some of these really awkward and low value towers, and still be very safe from any enemy attacks. Now, at the end of the day, if you've gotten all the high point value stuff and you have some extra moves, maybe you will come back and fully claim these, because fully claiming a tower is better than just having some one bridge, 1 point moves as part of your game, right? You can kind of redeem that 1 bridge, 1 point by claiming the whole tower a little bit. But some towers, that's just not really feasible to do efficiently, or you just have better towers to get, and so it's best to leave those and just have the path go through them, but in a safe manner like this. Whereas if you had gone through 2, let's say you had gone this way, to this one, through this one, and on here, maybe you don't really want these 2, but now that you've left 2 in a row next to each other, this is a weak point. Someone can come in, paint over this bridge right here, and if they paint over that bridge, you just lost access to everything you own, and you are very done. So make sure that you are really careful about not leaving, or as very little as possible, leaving these kinds of two bridge connections that you don't fully claim. So that's how to think about attacking and defending, and I hope this guide has helped you to kind of better get a grasp on what you're supposed to be doing in bridges and how to go and try and get a victory. Best of luck in the game. I hope you have as much fun as I did.